Hello, I'm Evie.
And I'm Emily.
And welcome to The Current,
where we talk about our current favourite YA reads.
Our team have selected 30 books we love from the past year in the hopes that you will too. And we've said every time in all of our videos, our team. Our team is me, you and Gavin.
What a team.
What a team. What a brilliant team.
Yeah.
And today we're talking about rebellion.
Just now off camera, that titling this sort of section was tricky because I think traditionally this would be the kind of thing that people would title books about mental health, books about big issues, books about relationships and all this kind of thing, which always feels a bit... It's not my favourite way to kind of classify things.
Yes.
But actually what all these books have in common is that it's not just about big issues and difficult topics, but actually it's about people confronting those and fighting back.
Okay.
And I think that's a really important thing to emphasise, that this isn't just about terrible things happening, but it's about how people react to those things and how people fight back. Yeah.
So the first one is The Sharp Edge of Silence by Kelly Rosenblum.
Yes.
You read this one.
I did.
So tell me all about it.
It's a tough one. It is a tough one. It is at its core about sexual assault. It's told from the perspective of 3 young people who are at an elite boarding school in America, and one of them was sexually assaulted by a schoolmate, by a classmate, at the end of their previous year. So they've come back after the summer. So that's Quinn, who is one of our characters and someone whose perspective we see right from the beginning. And there's no sugarcoating it. It's very hard to read. It's very upsetting, but it's also incredibly important, I think. And her story is tough, but it's actually the story of the other 2 characters that I found really fascinating, in terms of how people react to those environments of kind of toxic masculinity, of elitism, and the kind of boys will be boys club, these kind of things, and how seductive that can be to outsiders. So one of our other protagonists is called Max, and he's not from that world. He is a scholarship kid. He's not particularly popular, but through a series of events he joins this rowing club within the school, which is kind of the elite of the elite. It's where all the absolute kind of people who have loads of connections are involved in kind of societies, secret societies and things like that. And we like Max. He's very likeable, but it's fascinating to see how easily he's kind of seduced by this world of these boys who are doing pretty vile things, and that he would never do, but he doesn't confront them on it, or struggles to.
He's just a passive bystander.
He makes excuses. He, well, if I'm not doing it,
then it's okay. Yeah.
But then, of course, when he realises that it's people close to him that are being affected, and the female characters in the book, so there's Charlotte as well, kind of confronting that world, and realising that it's not okay, that you're just not doing the thing. You have to actually be. You can't just be passive. You have to fight back. Yeah, so it's hard hitting, but ultimately very satisfying, in terms of how it all kind of falls out. And I think again the addition of that kind of male perspective of the kind of not the baddie, but someone who is so easily kind of caught up in that world and can so easily think that they're not a part of it, just because they're not actively involved. Yeah. So yeah, very interesting. And there's an author's note from the author that is very moving as well, so I definitely recommend this one.
Definitely be aware of the trigger warnings for this one, because I can imagine it being quite a...
It is tough. It is tough.
Read.
But I think it needs to be for the subject matter.
Yeah. So our next book is Happyhead, which again is one that you've read, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, this is one... It had massive hype around it when it came out. I think it was described as sort of like the next Hunger Games or better than Hunger Games, and it's got a really interesting premise. So it's the idea of that it's sort of about the wellness industry and the mental health crisis that young people are facing. So it very easily could be in our world. And this idea that, this unprecedented low mood, this depression, all these kind of things that young people are going through, and this organisation called Happyhead are going to fix it. They're going to sort it all out. They've got a solution, and all you need to do is just get 100 teenagers off to this deserted, isolated place, and they're going to put them through this kind of summer camp style series of tasks and challenges, and they're going to fix it. Easy peasy.
Easy peasy.
Easy peasy.
It sounds like maybe that's a recipe for disaster.
Quite. So you've got the kind of Hunger Games element in that it's a bunch of young people sort of thrown together, competing against each other, but also in that there is more going on below the surface. And yes, our lead character, he approaches it with so much hope. He really wants this to work. He wants to be this person who, isn't anxious all the time. But then he meets all these different characters, and there's another character who's very moody and standoffish in a bit of a Mr. Darcy way. That's all
love Mr. Darcy, don't we? We love Mr. Darcy.
Big, burly, doesn't speak much, is very against all this, and then he discovers, he accidentally bumps into the founder, and it seems like she doesn't have as much control as maybe. But yeah, so there is a sequel coming out as well this year, and I have not read it, but I've heard rave reviews from people who have read advanced copies. So I think this is going to be a big one. I can see this becoming a show or a film.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah,
sounds great.
Hollyborn, icon of the teen and YA genre.
Oh, I do love her. I do love her. I've read Soulmates, and It Only Happens in the Movies, or something similar to that, both of which I love. But Soulmates is actually one of my all-time favourite romances.
Nice.
And that's coming from me.
And I
read a hell of a lot of romance. I still remember it now. I love it. It's such a good book. Anyway, this is nothing like that.
Awesome.
So You Could Be So Pretty is set in this horrible, horrible dystopian world that is almost eerily similar to the world that we live in.
Oh, I love
it.
Yay! Love that.
So the doctrine tells us that gender inequality is over. Women are free and they can do whatever they want. There's no issues apart from they have to mask themselves, which means wear a hell of a lot of makeup. They have to get all these surgeries done to perfect themselves. They have to starve themselves to stay thin. They can't behave in any kind of sort of masculine presenting way. They have to be perfect. We are talking perfect. Guess what happens to the boys?
I'm going to say nothing.
Oh yeah, nothing changes the boys. They don't have to do anything. They can be gross, disgusting, horrible, sexually abusive, and there's no repercussions for them. So it's great. All the problems of the world have been solved. That is sarcasm, just so we're clear on that.
Sarcasm alert here.
Sarcasm alert.
Oh dear.
So You Could Be So Pretty follows the story of Joni, who does not care about her appearance at all, and is therefore called an objectionable.
Lovely.
Yes, lovely. And then there's Belle, gorgeous Belle, prettiest girl in school. But the two characters are both competing for a scholarship to the education. Now, the education is university, essentially, but it's very few girls get to go to the education, and so they are competing for this scholarship. Neither of them can afford to pay for it, so they need the scholarship. And they are so opposite, so different. However, they are brought together because Belle is catcalled, sexually harassed by a man in a car, and the girls are told, oh, it's a compliment, take it as a compliment, it's nothing bad, and they report it to the police don't care, they're like, oh, it's just a compliment, you're so pretty, it's fine, and of course Joni says to Belle, it's not fine, you were harassed, you were catcalled, and that's not okay, and we can't normalise this. and they kind of build a friendship out of this experience that they've shared. And they're both very resistant to be friends with each other. However, they do start to realise they maybe have more things in common than things that keep them apart. There's kind of a romantic element that goes through the book, that we don't get the payoff that I would have wanted necessarily at the end. That said, it's a brilliant book. Just going into it, be aware that you're going to be disturbed because there's so many elements of it that are so similar. I mean, it's just taken out of real life. You know The Handmaid's Tale, of course, very famous book by Margaret Atwood. And as I was reading this, I was really drawing parallels with that. And something that Margaret Atwood has said numerous times is that she didn't actually make up anything that happens in The Handmaid's Tale. They are all real, true things that have happened to women around the world. And I feel as though that is the same for You Could Be So Pretty, because everything that's discussed is like, yeah, that's happened, yeah, that's happened, yeah, that's definitely happened, that's happened a million times. So just be aware of that going into it, just kind of a trigger warning there.
So it's time for another Gavin recommendation.
We love a Gavin recommendation, don't we? We really do. So this is Warrior Girl Unearthed by Angeline Boulley. And it's in this category because it talks about the big issue of indigenous artefacts, indigenous items of value and importance to their cultures being stolen by, how can we put this politely?
Museums.
People who have no business taking their stuff, essentially.
It might not even be in the country that the things were from.
Who could we be talking about? Anyway, it is set in America, and it follows the main character as she goes to a university and discovers that they have the remains of the warrior girl. And she and her fellow members of her community know that they have to get these artefacts back because it's a piece of her bone and other parts of who, a key parts of this warrior girl, this historic figure for their community, and she decides that she has to get it back. And she does a lot of research into the laws surrounding what a museum is allowed to do in order to keep artefacts that they have nothing to do with, and realises that they've been kind of using these loopholes to keep a hold of these parts of the warrior girl. And she basically realises the only solution to this problem is that they have to steal them.
Fair.
Because they're not going to get them back in a traditional legal sense, so their only option is to steal these artefacts back. And you know what? Rightly so, I think. They deserve to have these essential parts of their community within their community and given the respect that they deserve.
Just to be clear, we are only commending thievery in this very specific scenario.
Yes, we are. So it's a really heartfelt novel. It's got a lot of interesting perspectives and parts of the indigenous culture throughout the book as well. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. I love that. Love a museum being a baddie.
Yes.
Makes me happy. Thieves' Gambit, another one we've mentioned. There is a whole section of that where a certain museum is absolutely ridiculed, which I really enjoyed.
Yes.
But yes, I think, give them back the stuff.
Yep. Yes. So, our last book for today for our rebellion category is by an extremely well-known author, Simon James Green, and it's Boy Like Me. So tell us a little bit about it.
So, Boy Like Me is set in 1994, and it is set in a school in the UK. And for those of you who are up to date on your LGBTQ plus history, that was an era where Section 28 was in full effect, which essentially was worded in a way that meant that a school was well within its rights to ban books that contained anything that they perceived to be promoting a homosexual lifestyle.
Right.
Anything that, when it came to sex education, when it came to topics covered, you were on very shaky ground in terms of promoting anything other than a very heteronormative acceptable way of life.
So essentially acting as though anything beyond heteronormative relationships just doesn't exist and is not acceptable in any way, shape or form.
And that even mentioning it would be perceived as promoting it.
And this is fairly recent history as well. You know, this is the 90s. It's not even that long ago that we're talking about Section 28 existing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, you know, as librarians as well, some of these issues are rearing their heads again in terms of what kind of books can be available,
yes,
and what kind of books should be available. So it's something that we feel very strongly about. Yeah, it's nice to read a book where the librarian using the library is seen as an act of rebellion, I think.
It's actually, it's written in the beginning, isn't it? The dedication. What does it say? For Alice and hero librarians everywhere. What a brilliant dedication. Because we are facing issues of, especially in America, but also over here as well, issues of censorship and what is allowed to be published. And of course, these books are so important to young people and everyone really, in communicating that it's okay and you're allowed to exist, and you're you're very welcome in every walk of life. So I think books like this, and Simon James Green is so good about writing about these topics as well.
Such sensitivity with humour.
Yes.
Very relatable. It's a lovely book, and it's a romance at its forefront, but it is very much about how to still feel proud of yourself in a world that is against you. And I think we say it's very recent history, but it reads as very relevant.
Yeah.
I think as much as we'd like to think we've come a long way, but we've still got ways to go.
Yes. So we've mentioned all of our 5 books from the Rebellion category, but we've got some other recommendations as per usual. So do you want to kick us off, Emily? What have you got for us?
Yes, absolutely. So if you're looking for even more rebellious stories, or stories about people confronting difficult issues, we have a few. So The Eternal Return of Clara Hart by Louise Finch is probably something that I would say the sharp edge of silence. It has a similar difficult topic that it approaches, but it's done in the style of a time loop Groundhog Day style situation.
I love a time loop.
Yeah, so it's that thing, you wake up the same day, the same thing is going to happen, but our main character, something unpleasant happened this first night and she has to change
everything to avoid it happening again.
Yeah. So it's another one that is it's a difficult subject matter. There are elements of sort of sexual assault involved. But again, it's very well written, and a very important topic. Another one would be Moxie by Jennifer Mathieu, and that is about a young girl in a Texan high school who has had quite enough of the sort of overly controlling school district and how students are allowed to behave, and really fights back. So if you're looking for a real kind of power to the young people, then that's definitely one to check out.
Yes. I've got 2 as well. So one is a fantasy series actually, which is the An Ember in the Ashes series by Sabaa Tahir. And I've not personally read this, but a close friend of mine who also loves books, and my husband have both read this series, there's 4 books in the series, and they both loved it. And it's on my shelf at home and I need to read them. But again, rebellion is a key feature of those books too. And then another series that I have read and loved is the Legend series by Mary Lou.
Yes.
Yeah, and they are fantastic books. They've been around for a while now, but they are brilliant. And if you're looking for something that's really about rebellion with a little bit of romance, because I don't read it if it's not got romance in, then I highly recommend those books too.
And The Hunger Games.
The Hunger Games.
The Hunger Games.
So
don't need us.
Has anyone heard of the Hunger Games?
I've heard of little indie, lowbrow, yeah.
But yes, the Hunger Games, of course, as well. And we did mention in a previous video, but of course, The Hate You Give is a brilliant another example of rebellion. So yeah, some really good ones that fall into this category, I think.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. We had our coming of age genre, but actually fighting back is such an emerging kind of theme in YA novels, and I think it's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah.